we're going to have a conversation about the film, and then we're going to open it up to questions from all of you. I'm sure you're excited to speak with them. We were just outside in the lobby discussing how hard it was to film this film, to make this film in the location that it was made. Robert was kind enough to share some stories about beaches and other challenges. What was the most challenging aspect of getting the equipment and the crew and making the film in this area?
Yeah, I guess Jane Harper's books that we were adapting are very much about location. The location is the character in the films. And, you know, I guess to make the film as visceral and authentic as possible, we had to get into that world. So there was an invitation to the cast that we would be rolling up our sleeves, and there were no trailers 5 minutes from anywhere we filmed. Some of the locations, probably the toughest location was that waterfall, where we had to walk in the dark for about 45 minutes in the morning and then wait for the sun to come up to start filming in the heart of winter. But I think, you know, if you're making a film that is part survival story, you really do need to put the actors in a pretty tough situation to get that kind of, I don't know, it feels to me like a visceral quality that you just cannot get on a soundstage.
Absolutely, and you mentioned also wanting to give this film, a really cinematic, give the audience an incredibly cinematic experience. Was that part of why you committed to going, where you went?
Yeah, and I just want to thank you all for coming out to see the film at the cinema. It's really wonderful. I mean, we have made 3 films in a row. Eric and I, we've shot them all on a new large format camera system. We work, with Peter Raven's amazing music and this big musical and sound design elements to try and make the film, ideally suited for the cinema. We know lots of people watch it in other ways, but I think, I fell in love with coming to cinemas like this and seeing great works of cinema. And so our ambition has been to do that. That makes it harder because you're taking in, all of those cameras into very remote places. But I think technology has kind of liberated us a bit and allowed us to get into those locations and shoot the images that you saw today.
Well, and this is the second time that you've come back to, this source material from this author. What inspired you to adapt the first book, and what made you want to return to this book?
It was interesting. We finished The Dry, and we'd gone off and made a film, Blueback, together, and returned, and that was during the heart of the pandemic. And Eric and I were tossing around what to do next. And one of the things I think that really struck us in the book was the story of these 5 women lost in the bush, like this ensemble. And we started talking about, who would play the roles, and have we ever seen that in cinema before, and is that unique? And people depict the Australian bush in a certain way, but we've never seen it before. And I actually think there were lots of reasons, but I think the fundamental excitement was this kind of narrative idea and the possibility of casting these incredible actors, all 5 of them.
Yeah, they're remarkable. The cast that gets lost together and is compelled to work together to survive or turn against each other. How did you cast these roles? How did you choose such an amazing cast for this film?
Well, I'm really lucky because the secret weapon in my career is my wife, Jane Norris, who's one of Australia's leading casting directors. And she's pretty tough on me about 3 things. New talent, big new talent in the drawing, and this diversity, faces we've never seen before. But one element she's really big on is actors who have done great work who may not have been seen for a while. So in all of my films, she kind of asks me to look at actors that, maybe we haven't seen on our screens. Deborah Lee Furness, who, I absolutely loved working with, is a very good friend of ours, was the first actor that Jane suggested. And for people who love cinema here, she did a film back in Australia called Shame, which is really exceptional film, and hasn't acted in, I think she may not have been on the screen for about 8 years. And so it was wonderful to work with her. And I love that feeling on set of like a mix of, talent and merging to tell you, there were some days with the five of them in the bush rifle action, I had no idea what was going to happen. To say it was easy would be lying. No, they were amazing. I have such a respect for them all. I think, people would know Anna Torv from her work in America, but Cissy Stringer and Lucy Ansell playing Bree and Beth as well, and Robin McLeavy, one of our great actors, unheralded, has done a lot of work over here, but exceptional. So we're delighted to have that cast.
Well, and Eric, this is your second time working with this character. What new things did you discover about him in this film?
It was really interesting. I hadn't had a chance to, reprise a role or do something twice before. And whilst we knew that the core of the story was about the four women getting lost and that investigation, it was like, well, what new things do we learn about Aaron? But we were also really rigorous about the film being a standalone. And so we wanted to make sure we didn't pepper the film with too much that if you hadn't seen the first film, if you hadn't seen The Dry, that you would feel like you had to catch up on something. There's enough of a clue that we hope people who see this film but haven't seen The Dry would then go back to it. So we discussed what sort of time frame would have existed between the first story and the second. And there's a bit of an inversion, like The Dry starts out with Aaron on his personal time and he gets lured into an investigation. And here it was the other way around. It's like we start with him in his professional environment and we gradually peel back more and more layers of him as we go. So it becomes more personal as the film goes on. So that was something that we sort of charted and knew it was a good opportunity to learn something new about him.
I know that right now in the United States there's a huge, enthusiasm for crime-based films and podcasts. Is that happening in Australia right now? And I know the first film was wildly popular, one of the most successful films, won awards and nominations for you both. Is that something that is happening in Australia right now?
It's very popular. I think it's one of the reasons why Jane Harper, she's so popular. These books are huge back home and have travelled really well. And I think it's fun for us because we know that the audience is going to get involved. Like, we all think we're so smart. We all think we can solve crime. We all think we can be one step ahead. And they're amazingly fun in the edit because there's like so many different versions where we're playing around with, well, how do we shift the focus onto the wrong person here, and for how long? And it was a new thing for us because we hadn't really worked in this space before. And the films, both of them really kind of reveal themselves through the edit. They're both really long processes. But yeah, they're very popular, and it's great to be a part of it. I hadn't done one before The Dry, I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong. But so I think it's a great fun drama.
And it's interesting, what I loved about Force of Nature, and what probably attracted me to the idea of doing it is, there is so much crime drama on the small screen and in the cinema, and it's often about a police officer of some form, a good person pursuing an evil person who has perpetrated a crime. And it was a tricky challenge, but something I really loved. That Force of Nature is about the grey area of crime. I think that speech at the end where Fawkes says, "Were any of the women truly guilty?" And it was a challenge because people's expectations are going to be that the crime in this is some brutal, horrific crime. But actually what Jane Harper's exploring is the idea that all of us can be complicit, including Aaron Falk. And that idea of her commentary on what policing is and what pursuing the truth in a criminal investigation is, and the cost of that, is something I found fascinating and unique. And it gave us a slightly unique spin on an established genre.
And her books are just wildly popular and so, positively reviewed. When you were adapting this book, did you have to make any changes in order to make it work for the film?
Jane gives us incredible freedom to play around with elements of the structure, but the character landscape is exactly the same as the book. One thing that we really explored in the structure was the use of time, the past and present. Her books do that, but they don't do it in the same way as the films. The films attempt to try and have the flashbacks into the past all driven by Aaron Falk. Whereas in the book, a novel is a different experience. You can flick through, you can read something again, you can go 100 pages back and reread something. Whereas the book doesn't let you have that. So a lot of our structural choices in the edit were about making sure that Aaron Falk was discovering the information that we saw in the flashbacks. So it was more about the organisation of the story and how we played around with that for a cinematic form. That was the challenge. But we had two editors, amazing editors. Maria Baboutzis, Alexander De Franceschi, who edited the Australian film Line, which is one of my favourite recent Australian films, and it was a long edit to get that narrative right.
One of the things I loved about this film was that all the characters seemed to be holding multiple secrets while trying to discover each other's secrets. How did you, it was such a wonderful use of time and pacing that you established in this film. What was your strategy in the edit room once you put this together to achieve that effect?
It's the eternal dilemma in my career that, it's the famous Billy Wilder quote that if you let an audience work out that 1 + 1 = 2, they'll love you forever. And it's a real trick, because when you write a script and you show it to people who are going to decide whether to invest or not, they usually ask for more clarity. And so you keep making things clearer, and then you get in the edit and you try to get the pacing right. And it's this eternal dilemma of, am I giving too much information? Is there too much exposition here? Is the audience smarter than I think that, and so I think, if I think of the great challenge, I think the pace that you're talking about comes from letting the audience work things out rather than working them out for you. And I haven't always got it right. I feel like it's the hardest thing for a filmmaker right now, is working out how to calibrate the revelation of information. Because some people will always go, I didn't understand that, I needed more clarity there. But then other people, if you take them by the hand too much, are frustrated by it. Particularly, as Eric said, in this genre, which is a new genre for us.
Right, and Eric, you did such a wonderful job with your character too, alluding to so much of his past without really saying it, and then working with all of these incredibly gifted female actors as well. Can you see yourself, we talked about this in the lobby a little bit, can you see yourself, maybe if not adapting the third book in the series, working in this genre again?
Oh, yeah, my theory is always be open to everything. So yeah, I would be for sure. I think it's structurally really interesting, and I think Jane Harper's strength is that she just writes great characters within the genre. And I think that's why the Dry was so popular. I think that's why this book was so popular. I remember when I read it, I love the fact that when I got to the 5 women, I never once had to go back a page and like, which one's Julie, which one's Alice, which one, like, they're so vividly written and they're so strong and individually different and very distinct. And I think that's the casting's done such a great job that we've achieved that with the 5 women. So yeah, it's an exciting genre, and it's fun because it's like, how much do you give away? How much as an actor can you try and lead the audience astray as well? Like, can you pull some levers that sends them down the wrong rabbit hole?
I mean, that sounds like a really fun challenge for an actor.
Yeah, it is, and obviously, working so closely with Rob and I, we just in constant dialogue about, calibrating that stuff, and also like, we had the flashback, so it's like calibrating, well, how much am I relying on the flashbacks to tell the audience something, and how much do I play into that, and just really trusting that we'll work that out in the end. Like, we'll be able to calibrate that in the end. We can go both ways when we're filming.